I hadn't been to that station in years. Maybe a decade. Maybe longer. Time had a way of folding in on itself when you stopped paying attention, and I had stopped paying attention to most things a long time ago. It was late. Past 11. The kind of hour when the world feels like it belongs to someone else. The platform was nearly empty. A woman in a hospital uniform sat on a bench near the far end, her head tilted back against the wall, eyes closed. A teenager with headphones stood by the vending machine, bathed in its pale fluorescent glow. And me, standing there with my suitcase at my feet, scrolling through my phone like it mattered. The business trip had been pointless. 3 days of meetings that could have been emails, handshakes with people whose names I'd already forgotten, hotel rooms that all looked the same. I'd texted Clara when I landed. She'd sent back a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. No, how was your flight, or we missed you. Just a thumbs up. Ethan hadn't replied at all, which wasn't unusual anymore. He was 17. I'd become background noise in his life, and maybe I'd let that happen. Maybe I preferred it. I typed out a message to Clara. Something about being home soon. Something about being tired. I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it without sending. What was the point? She wasn't waiting up. She never did anymore. The glass barrier behind me reflected the platform in warped, ghostly shapes. I caught my own face in it and barely recognized the man staring back. When had I started looking so worn down? When had my eyes gone so flat? I turned away. That's when I saw him. He was standing across the platform, maybe 30 feet away, hands in his coat pockets, looking down at the tracks. For a moment I thought I was imagining it. The mind does that sometimes when you're tired. It pulls people out of memory and drops them into the present like they were always supposed to be there. But then he looked up, and I knew. It had been more than 20 years. 23, if I was being exact. And I was always exact about him, even when I pretended not to be. His hair was shorter now, touched with gray at the temples. His face had softened in places, sharpened in others. But the way he stood, the way he held his shoulders, the way his gaze moved across the platform with that same careful attention. It was him, Elias. My chest tightened. My hands went cold. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, staring at him like a ghost I'd spent half my life trying not to see. He hadn't noticed me yet. Or maybe he had, and was pretending he hadn't. That would be like him. Give the other person time to decide what they wanted to do. Give them the choice. I should have stayed where I was. I should have turned around, walked to the other end of the platform, waited for my train in silence. That would have been the smart thing, the safe thing. But I didn't. I picked up my suitcase and walked toward him. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was walking through water, like the air itself was trying to stop me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it before I even reached him. He looked up when I was about 10 feet away. His eyes widened. Just slightly. Just enough. I stopped. My voice came out cracked and small, like I hadn't used it in years. I missed you. For a second, he just stared at me. Then he laughed. Not the way you laugh at a joke. The way you laugh when something catches you off guard and you don't know what else to do. It was soft, almost disbelieving. He took a step closer. His voice was quieter than I remembered, but it still had that same warmth that used to undo me. Say it again, he said, but only so I can hear it. I opened my mouth, closed it. My throat felt like it was closing. I could feel the weight of every year that had passed between us pressing down on my chest. Every choice I'd made, every word I hadn't said. The train was coming. I could hear it in the distance, a low rumble growing louder. The platform lights flickered. The woman on the bench stood up. The teenager walked toward the edge. And I looked at Elias. Really looked at him. At the lines around his eyes. At the way his mouth was set, like he was holding something back. At the way he was waiting for me to speak. I missed you, I said again. Softer this time. So only he could hear it. He nodded. Just once. Like he'd been waiting 20 years for me to say it. Like he'd known, somehow, that I would. The train pulled in. The doors opened. People shuffled past us. I didn't move. Neither did he. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I was standing in my own life again. The train took me home. Elias got on a different car. We didn't exchange numbers. Didn't make plans. Just that brief moment on the platform. Those words hanging in the air between us. and then the doors closed, and we were separated by metal and glass and the forward momentum of our separate lives. I sat by the window and watched the dark blur of the city give way to suburbs, street lights, shopping centers, the clean, ordered geometry of neighborhoods that all looked like mine. By the time I reached my stop, I'd almost convinced myself it hadn't happened, that I'd imagined him, that exhaustion and too many identical hotel rooms had conjured a ghost. But when I walked through my front door, I knew it had been real, because everything felt different. The house was dark except for the light over the stove. Clara always left it on for me, a small kindness that had become routine, empty of meaning. I set my suitcase down in the hallway and stood there for a moment, listening to the silence. Upstairs, I could hear the faint hum of Ethan's box fan. He always slept with it on, even in winter. Clara would be asleep too, her book on the nightstand, her reading glasses folded on top of it. I used to love coming home. There was a time when I'd take the stairs two at a time, eager to slip into bed beside her, to feel her warmth, to whisper about my trip until we both fell asleep mid-sentence. But that was years ago. Maybe 10, maybe more. Now coming home felt like returning to a museum of my own life. Everything preserved exactly as I'd left it. Nothing alive. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen sink, looking out at the backyard. Clara's garden. She'd spent years on it. Roses along the fence. Lavender by the patio. A small vegetable patch that produced more tomatoes than we could ever eat. She tried to get me interested in it once. Bought me gloves, showed me how to prune, how to mulch. I'd done it for a few weekends, then found excuses. Work, fatigue, a pulled muscle. Eventually she stopped asking. The garden was beautiful. I could see that, but I felt nothing looking at it. Just like I felt nothing looking at the framed photos on the refrigerator. Our wedding day. Ethan's graduation from middle school. A vacation to the coast we'd taken 3 summers ago where we'd barely spoken to each other except to coordinate meals and driving shifts. I finished the water, rinsed the glass, set it in the dish rack. Then I climbed the stairs as quietly as I could. Clara was asleep on her side, facing away from me. The shape of her under the blankets was so familiar it hurt. I knew every curve, every angle. 17 years of marriage. And yet standing there in the doorway, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. I changed in the bathroom, brushed my teeth, stared at my reflection again, trying to see what Elias had seen. What had he thought, looking at me after all this time? Did I look like I'd buried myself alive? Did he see the weight I carried? Did he pity me? When I slipped into bed, Clara stirred slightly, but didn't wake. I lay there on my back, staring at the ceiling, feeling the inches between us like miles. I thought about college, about the version of myself who stayed up until dawn writing papers I cared about, arguing about books and philosophy and the shape of a life worth living. I thought about sitting on the steps of the library with Elias, sharing a cigarette even though neither of us really smoked, talking about everything and nothing until the sky turned pale. I thought about the night he told me he loved me. We were 22. It was raining. We were drunk on cheap wine and the recklessness of being young and untethered. He'd said it like it was the simplest truth in the world. I love you. And I'd said it back. And for a few months, maybe a year, we'd built something fragile and perfect and doomed. Then graduation. Then the real world pressing in with its demands and expectations. My parents. Their questions. Their vision of who I was supposed to become. I'd met Clara at a work function 6 months later. She was kind, smart, uncomplicated. She didn't ask me to be anything I wasn't ready to be. And I convinced myself that was enough. That safety was the same as happiness. I'd written to Elias once, trying to explain. The letter had been 7 pages long, full of apologies and justifications and cowardice. I never sent it. I threw it away and told myself I was doing the right thing. The mature thing. I was building a life. A real life. Not some fantasy that would crumble under the weight of reality. But lying there in the dark, listening to Clara's steady breathing, I couldn't remember why that had seemed so important. I couldn't remember what I'd been so afraid of. Morning came too quickly. I woke to the sound of the shower running and Ethan's alarm blaring down the hall. The house came alive with its weekday rhythms. Clara appeared in the doorway, already dressed, her hair still damp. She asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes. She nodded and disappeared. Breakfast was the usual choreography. Clara made oatmeal. Ethan stumbled downstairs in his school clothes, earbuds already in, his world sealed off from ours. I sat at the table with my coffee and the newspaper I didn't read. Clara asked about my trip. I gave her the condensed version. The meetings were fine. The hotel was fine. Everything was fine. She nodded, stirring her tea, not really listening. Or maybe listening, but not caring. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. Ethan grabbed a granola bar and headed for the door. I called after him, asked if he needed a ride. He said no, his friend was picking him up. The door closed. The house settled back into quiet. Clara started loading the dishwasher. I should have helped. Should have said something. Asked about her week. Told her the garden looked beautiful. Something. Anything. But the words wouldn't come. They never did anymore. She glanced at me, and for a moment, I thought she might say something real. Might ask me what was wrong. Might break through the glass wall we'd built between us. But she just smiled. That small, tired smile I'd seen 1,000 times. Then she said she had errands to run and asked if I needed anything from the store. I said no. She left, and I sat there alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the life I'd chosen, feeling like I was suffocating. I thought about texting Elias, but I didn't have his number. Didn't even know if he still lived in the area. Maybe he'd been passing through. Maybe last night was just a strange, brief intersection of two lives that had long since diverged. But I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd listened when I spoke, the way those 3 words, "I missed you," had felt more true than anything I'd said in years. I went to my office, turned on my computer, stared at my inbox. 43 unread emails, reports to review, calls to return. The machinery of my professional life grinding forward, indifferent to whether I cared about any of it. I opened a blank document instead. Started typing. I'm not sure what I thought I was doing. Writing to him, maybe. Or to myself. Trying to make sense of what I was feeling. But after a few sentences, I stopped. Deleted it all. Closed the laptop. The day stretched ahead of me, empty and suffocating. And somewhere out there, in this same small radius of ordinary life, Elias was moving through his own day. Separate. Unreachable. But not gone. Not anymore. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at work, sitting through a meeting that didn't require my presence. Budget projections. Quarterly targets. Words that meant nothing floating through stale conference room air. I'd stopped listening 20 minutes in, nodding occasionally when someone looked my way, my mind elsewhere. When my phone buzzed, I glanced down expecting Clara. A reminder about dinner plans or a question about the car needing an oil change. The small, practical exchanges that made up the architecture of our marriage. But it wasn't Clara. The sender name made my chest tighten. Elias Harding. The subject line was simple. Last night. I stared at it for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds. Around me, people continued talking. Charts appeared on the projector screen. Someone laughed at something I didn't hear. And I sat there, frozen, my thumb hovering over the screen. I opened it. The message was brief. It's been a long time. Coffee. That was all. No explanation. No reminiscing. Just an invitation, clean and simple, like we'd seen each other last week instead of 2 decades ago. I locked my phone and set it face down on the table. Tried to refocus on the meeting. Failed. My mind was racing, running through every possible response. Every reason to say yes. Every reason to say no. The smart thing would be to ignore it. Delete it. Pretend I never saw it. Go home to Clara and Ethan and the quiet, predictable safety of the life I'd built. But my hands were shaking. The meeting ended. I gathered my things, returned to my office, closed the door. I read the email again and again, searching for something between the lines that probably wasn't there. What did he want? Was this closure or reopening? Did it matter? I spent the rest of the afternoon staring at that message. I drafted a dozen replies. Too formal, too casual, too eager, too distant. I deleted them all. By the time I left work, I still hadn't responded. I drove home in a daze, barely registering the familiar turns, the traffic lights, the long stretch of road that led to my neighborhood. In the driveway, I sat in the car for 10 minutes, phone in hand, reading those 4 words over and over. It's been a long time. Coffee. Finally, I typed back. When? His response came almost immediately. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock. He included the name of a cafe I didn't recognize, an address on the edge of town. I wrote back, I'll be there. Then I turned off my phone and went inside. That night at dinner, Clara asked if I was feeling all right. I looked tired, she said. Distracted. I told her I was fine. Just a long day. She nodded, unconvinced but unwilling to push. Ethan didn't look up from his phone. We ate in near silence, the sound of forks on plates filling the spaces where conversation should have been. Later, lying in bed, I thought about telling her. About saying I'd run into an old friend, that we were meeting for coffee, that it was nothing she needed to worry about. But the words felt like a lie even before I spoke them. Because it wasn't nothing. And we both would have known it. I barely slept. When morning came, I moved through the day on autopilot. Work, emails, a lunch I didn't taste. And all the while, the clock moved toward 3. I left the office early, telling my assistant I had an appointment. I didn't say what kind. She didn't ask. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner in a part of town I rarely visited. The kind of place that served expensive coffee and had mismatched furniture and art on the walls by local painters no one had heard of. I parked across the street and sat in the car for 5 minutes, trying to calm my breathing. When I finally walked in, I saw him immediately. He was sitting by the window, 2 cups already on the table, his coat draped over the chair beside him. He looked up when the door chimed. Smiled. Not the careful, tentative smile from the train platform, but something warmer. Almost relieved. I crossed the room, my legs unsteady. He stood when I reached the table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he gestured to the seat across from him. I got you a coffee, he said. Black, no sugar. If you still take it that way. I do, I said, and sat down. The first few minutes were awkward. We circled each other with safe topics. The weather. The traffic. How strange it was to be back in this town. He'd moved away after college, he said. Spent years in Portland, then Seattle, then a few years abroad. He'd only returned 6 months ago to help his sister with their mother's estate. She'd passed in the spring. I told him I was sorry. He nodded, staring into his cup. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest since I saw him on the platform. Why did you reach out? He looked at me for a long moment. Because I wasn't sure I'd get another chance. The honesty of it caught me off guard. No deflection. No pretense. Just the truth, simple and direct. I asked him about his life. If he'd gotten married. If he had kids. He shook his head. Came close once, he said. But it didn't work out. And after that, I stopped trying to make myself fit into something I wasn't. I felt the weight of what he wasn't saying. The parallel between his life and mine. The choice he'd made to be alone rather than pretend. The choice I'd made to pretend rather than be alone. We talked for over an hour. The conversation shifted, loosened. He asked about my work. I asked about his. He was teaching now. High school English. He said it was exhausting and rewarding, and most days he couldn't tell which one it was more. I told him about my job, the meetings, the reports, the slow erosion of caring about any of it. He listened in that way he always had, his full attention on me, like nothing else in the room existed. At some point, he mentioned a park. Said he walked there sometimes. That it had benches overlooking the river. That it reminded him of a place we used to go. I remembered it immediately. The library lawn. That bench under the oak tree where we'd spent so many afternoons, books spread around us, talking until the sun went down and the campus lights came on. He suggested we walk there now. If I had time. I should have said no. Should have checked my watch, made an excuse about needing to get home. But I didn't. We left the cafe and drove separately to the park. It was late afternoon, the light starting to soften, the air cool, but not cold. We walked along the path by the river, not saying much at first, just moving side by side in a rhythm that felt familiar despite the years. Eventually, we found a bench. Sat down. Watched the water move past us, dark and steady. He spoke first. Asked if I was happy. The question hung in the air between us. I could have lied. Could have given him the answer I gave everyone else. That I was fine. That I had a good life. a family, stability, all the things people were supposed to want. But I couldn't. I don't know, I said. I don't think I've been happy in a long time. He didn't respond, just nodded, like he'd already known. We sat there until the light began to fade, until the park started to empty and the air turned cold. And when we finally stood to leave, he asked if we could do this again. I said yes. Because the truth was, sitting there beside him, I'd felt something I hadn't felt in years. I'd felt awake. I'd felt seen. I'd felt like the person I used to be before I buried myself under responsibility and silence and compromise. I drove home in the dark, my mind racing. Clara was in the kitchen when I walked in, putting away dishes. She asked where I'd been. I told her I'd had coffee with an old friend from college. She asked who. I said the name Elias and watched her face for recognition. There was none. She'd never heard me mention him. Not once in 17 years. She said that was nice. Asked if I wanted dinner. I said I'd already eaten. Then I went upstairs, closed the door to my office, and sat in the dark. My phone buzzed. A message from Elias. Thank you for today. I stared at it, then typed back. Same time next week. His response was immediate. Yes. I set the phone down, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something close to hope. Even though I knew it was dangerous, even though I knew it would complicate everything, I couldn't stop. We met again the following week, and then the week after that, and then it stopped being weekly and became something else. Something I couldn't name, but couldn't stop. At first, I told myself it was harmless. Just two old friends catching up, filling in the gaps of 20 years. But even then, I knew I was lying to myself. Because friends don't feel their pulse quicken when a text arrives. Friends don't spend hours replaying conversations, analyzing every word, every pause, every moment of eye contact that lasted a beat too long. The meetings followed a pattern. Coffee first, always at that same cafe on the edge of town where no one I knew would see us. Then walks. Long, meandering routes through parks and along the river and down streets I'd driven past 1,000 times but never really looked at. With Elias beside me, everything looked different. Sharper, more vivid, like I'd been seeing the world through frosted glass and someone had finally wiped it clean. We talked about everything. Books we'd read, music we'd discovered, the small failures and disappointments that make up a life. He told me about a relationship that had ended badly in Seattle, about a year he'd spent teaching English in Vietnam, about his mother's decline and how he'd sat with her at the end, holding her hand while she slipped away. I told him about the promotions I didn't want, about Ethan growing distant, about the slow erosion of intimacy in my marriage until Clara and I were just two people sharing an address. But mostly, we talked about before, about college, about the version of ourselves we used to be. He remembered things I'd forgotten. The night we'd driven 2 hours to see a band neither of us had heard of, just because we wanted an adventure. The argument we'd had about Kafka that had lasted until 4 in the morning. The way I used to read aloud to him, acting out different voices until he laughed so hard he couldn't breathe. Do you remember the library? He asked one afternoon. We were sitting on a bench near the river, the same bench we'd claimed as ours. 4th floor, the back corner by the philosophy section. I remembered. That had been our place. Where we'd studied and not studied. Where we'd kissed when we thought no one was watching. Where we'd built a small, secret world that felt infinite and impossible at the same time. I used to go back there, he said quietly. After you left. After you stopped answering my calls. I'd sit in that same spot and try to figure out what I'd done wrong. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. He looked at me. Then why did you disappear? I didn't have a good answer. Not one that wouldn't sound like an excuse. I tried anyway. I was scared. My parents, my family, everyone had these expectations. And I thought if I could just fit into the shape they wanted, I'd eventually become that person. That it would feel real. And did it? No. The word hung between us. Simple and devastating. We started finding reasons to see each other more often. Lunch on weekdays when I could get away from the office. Evening walks when I told Clara I was going to the gym. Saturdays when she took Ethan to his music lessons, and I had 2 hours of freedom I spent entirely with Elias. I knew it was wrong. Knew I was lying by omission, letting Clara believe I was somewhere I wasn't, with someone who didn't exist in the version of my life she knew. But I couldn't stop, because with Elias, I felt like myself again. Not the careful, controlled version I'd become, but the person underneath. The one who used to stay up all night talking about ideas that mattered. The one who believed life could be more than a series of obligations and routines. One Saturday, we drove out to a place he remembered, a state park about an hour away with hiking trails and a lake. We'd been there once in college, camping with a group of friends, though really we'd spent most of the weekend sneaking away to be alone. We hiked one of the easier trails, not talking much, just moving through the trees with the afternoon sun filtering down in golden shafts. At the top, there was a clearing with a view of the valley below. We sat on a flat rock, catching our breath, and Elias pulled out a thermos of coffee he'd brought. I'd forgotten he did that. Always prepared. Always thinking ahead. We sat there for a long time, passing the thermos back and forth, watching the light change. He asked about Ethan, what he was like, if we were close. I wanted to lie, to paint a picture of a strong father-son bond, of meaningful conversations and shared interests. But I couldn't. We used to be, I said, when he was younger, but somewhere along the way, I lost him. Or maybe he just grew up and realized I wasn't who he thought I was. What do you mean? I don't know. I think kids can sense when something's off, when you're not being honest, even if they can't name it. And Ethan, he's smart. He sees things. I think he knows I'm not happy, that his mother and I are just going through the motions. And maybe he blames me for that. Do you blame yourself? I looked at him. Yes. He didn't try to reassure me. Didn't tell me I was being too hard on myself. He just nodded, like he understood. On the drive back, he asked if I'd ever thought about leaving, about starting over. The question should have felt intrusive, but it didn't. All the time, I said, but it's not that simple. There's Ethan. And Clara. She hasn't done anything wrong. She doesn't deserve to have her life blown apart because I can't figure out who I am. Maybe she deserves honesty more than she deserves protection. I didn't respond, because he was right. And I hated that he was right. The meetings became more frequent. 3 times a week. Then 4. Then almost every day. I started making excuses at work, leaving early, arriving late. Clara noticed. She started asking more questions. Where was I going? Why was I so distracted? Who was I texting? Just work, I'd say. Just stress. Just tired. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But she didn't push. Maybe because she didn't want to know the answer. Maybe because as long as we didn't name it, she could pretend everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. I was changing. I could feel it. The way I moved through the house, through my life, was different. I laughed more, thought more, felt more. And the contrast between who I was becoming and who I'd been for the past 2 decades was so stark, it was almost painful. Ethan noticed too. One night at dinner, he looked up from his phone and asked if I was okay, if something was going on. I'm fine, I said. He stared at me for a moment, then shook his head and went back to his screen, like he'd tried to reach me and I'd failed him again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed beside Clara, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of my deception pressing down on me. I thought about Elias, probably awake in his own apartment across town, living a life that was honest even if it was lonely. And I thought about myself, trapped in a life that was neither. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Elias. You awake? I picked it up, careful not to disturb Clara. Yeah. Can't stop thinking about today. Me neither. There was a long pause. Then, I know this is complicated. I'm not trying to make your life harder. You're not. I typed back. You're making it better. Another pause. Then, that scares me. Me too. I set the phone down and closed my eyes. But sleep wouldn't come. The next time we met, something had shifted. We were walking by the river, the same route we always took, but the air between us felt heavier. Charged. He walked closer than usual, our shoulders almost touching. Every accidental brush of his hand against mine sent electricity through me. We reached the bench and sat down. For a while, neither of us spoke. Just watched the water, the light playing across its surface. Then he said my name. Julian. I turned to look at him. I need to tell you something, he said. And you can tell me to stop. You can walk away, and we can pretend I never said it. But I can't keep it in anymore. My heart was pounding. I'm falling for you again, he said. Maybe I never stopped. And I know you're married. I know you have a family. I know this is impossible. But I can't keep pretending this is just two old friends catching up. Because it's not. Not for me. The world seemed to stop. The river, the trees, the people passing by on the path. Everything went quiet except for the sound of my own breathing. I should have told him he was right. That this was impossible. That we needed to stop before it went any further. That I couldn't do this to Clara, to Ethan, to the life I'd built. But I didn't. Instead, I said the only true thing I could think of. It's not just friends for me either. He looked at me. Really looked at me. And in his eyes, I saw everything. Hope and fear and a question he was too afraid to ask. So what do we do? He said quietly. I don't know. We sat there in silence, the truth finally spoken aloud, and I felt the ground beneath me beginning to crack. The confession changed everything and nothing. We still met, still walked, still talked. But now there was a weight to every silence, a meaning behind every glance. We both knew we were standing at the edge of something we couldn't take back. I thought about him constantly. At work, at home, in the middle of conversations with Clara that I wasn't really part of. His voice, his laugh, the way he looked at me like he could see straight through to the parts of myself I'd spent decades trying to hide. 2 weeks after he told me how he felt, I stayed late at the office. Not because I had work to do, but because I couldn't face going home. Couldn't sit across the dinner table from Clara and pretend everything was normal when my entire world was coming apart. Around 8, my phone buzzed. Elias, are you okay? You seem far away lately. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, can I come over? The response was immediate. Yes. He sent me his address. An apartment on the north side of town, in one of those old buildings that had been converted from something industrial. I'd never been there before. We'd always met in neutral spaces, public spaces, safe spaces where nothing could happen. I drove across town in a fog, parked on the street, stood outside his building for 5 minutes, my hand on the door, knowing that if I walked through it, I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. I went in anyway. His apartment was on the 3rd floor, small but warm, books everywhere, plants on the windowsills, art on the walls that actually meant something. It looked like him, felt like him, nothing like the sterile, carefully arranged spaces of my own house. He opened the door in jeans and a sweater, his hair slightly messy, his feet bare. Casual, comfortable, real. Come in, he said. I stepped inside. He closed the door behind me. For a moment, we just stood there in his small entryway, neither of us sure what to do next. He offered me wine. I said yes. We sat on his couch, a worn leather thing that had probably been with him through multiple moves, multiple cities, multiple versions of his life. He poured 2 glasses from a bottle that was already open. We drank in silence. Eventually, he asked what was wrong, why I'd wanted to come over. I don't know how to do this, I said. Do what? Any of it. Be married. Be a father. Be the person everyone thinks I am. I feel like I'm suffocating. Like I've been holding my breath for 20 years, and I don't know how to exhale. He set his glass down, turned to face me. You don't have to hold your breath here. Something in me broke. Or maybe something finally opened. I felt tears in my eyes, hot and unexpected. I hadn't cried in years. Maybe a decade. I'd trained myself not to feel deeply enough to need to. But sitting there on his couch, with him looking at me like I mattered, like I was worth seeing, I couldn't hold it back anymore. I started talking, really talking, about the night I decided to marry Clara. How I convinced myself it was the right thing, the mature thing, the thing that would make me normal. About watching Ethan grow up and feeling like a fraud, like I was teaching him how to live a lie. About waking up every morning in a life that didn't feel like mine and not knowing how to escape it. He listened, didn't interrupt, didn't judge, just let me pour it all out until there was nothing left. When I finally stopped, he reached over and took my hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt monumental, like he was holding all the pieces of me I'd scattered and saying it was okay, that I didn't have to keep breaking myself apart. We sat like that for a long time, his thumb moving slowly across my knuckles. neither of us speaking. Then he said, "You know you can't keep living like this. It's killing you." "I know. So what are you going to do?" "I don't know." He squeezed my hand. "Yes, you do." He was right. I did know. I'd known for weeks, maybe months. I just hadn't been ready to admit it. I looked at him, at the way the lamplight caught his face, at the kindness in his eyes, at the man who had waited half his life for me to find my way back. "I missed you," I said, just like I had on the train platform, just like I had that first time at the cafe. He smiled, sad and soft. "I know." Then he leaned closer, slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull back, to stop this, to leave and pretend this night never happened. I didn't pull back. The kiss was tentative at first, careful, like we were both afraid we might shatter. His hand came up to my face, his fingers gentle against my jaw, and I felt something inside me unlock. Something that had been closed and guarded for so long I'd forgotten it was there. When we finally pulled apart, I was shaking. My breath was uneven. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. He rested his forehead against mine, whispered, "Are you okay?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "We can stop." But I didn't want to stop. For the first time in decades, I wanted to keep going, wanted to feel, wanted to be present in my own life instead of watching it from a distance. I kissed him again, longer this time, deeper, and I felt years of repression and denial and carefully constructed walls crumbling around me. We stayed like that for a long time, kissing, holding each other, not talking, just existing in the space we'd created where pretense didn't matter and I could finally breathe. Eventually, reality crept back in. I pulled away, looked at the clock on his wall. It was past 11. "I have to go," I said. He nodded. "I know." But neither of us moved. "Julian," he said quietly, "I need you to understand something. I'm not asking you to leave your family. I'm not asking you to blow up your life for me. But I can't be the person you hide. I can't be the secret you keep while you go home and pretend to be someone else. I've done that before, and it destroyed me." I looked at him, at the pain in his eyes, the pain I'd caused once before and was causing again. "I don't want you to be a secret," I said. "Then what do you want?" "I want to be honest. For once in my life, I want to be honest." He held my gaze. "Then you know what you have to do." I did know. The thought terrified me, but staying terrified me more. I stood up. He walked me to the door. At the threshold, I turned back. "I'm sorry," I said. "For all of it. For disappearing. For letting you think you weren't enough. For taking 20 years to find my way back." He shook his head. "Don't apologize for that. Just don't disappear again." "I won't." He smiled. That same soft, sad smile. "I'll hold you to that." I left, walked down the stairs, got in my car, sat in the driver's seat with my hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from Clara. "Where are you? It's late." I stared at the message, at the life it represented, the expectations, the responsibilities. The person I'd been pretending to be for so long, I'd almost forgotten it was pretense. Then I started the car and drove home. The house was dark except for the porch light. Clara was waiting up, sitting on the couch with a book she wasn't reading. "Where were you?" she asked. I thought about lying, about saying I'd been at the office or grabbed drinks with a colleague, or any of the dozen excuses I'd used over the past few months. But I was tired of lying. "I need to talk to you," I said. She looked up, and in her eyes, I saw that she already knew, had probably known for a while. She just hadn't wanted to say it aloud. She closed her book, set it aside, and waited. And for the first time in our entire marriage, I told her the truth. Clara sat perfectly still on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. The book she'd been holding lay beside her, forgotten. The house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen, each second marking time I couldn't take back. I stayed standing, couldn't bring myself to sit, couldn't bring myself to get comfortable before destroying everything. "There's someone else," I said, "not because I want there to be, but because there always has been." She didn't react, not visibly, just kept looking at me with those steady, unreadable eyes. "I met someone. From college. His name is Elias." The word hung in the air. His. I watched her process it. Saw the moment of confusion, then understanding, then something that looked like relief mixed with devastation. How long? She asked. Her voice was calm. Too calm. We reconnected 2 months ago. But it's not about him. Not really. It's about me. About who I am. Who I've always been. She nodded slowly. Like pieces were falling into place. Things she'd sensed but never named. I kept talking. The words came easier now that I'd started. I told her about college, about Elias, about the choice I'd made to walk away from that part of myself because I thought I could. I told her I'd loved her, that I still cared about her, but that I'd never been fully present in our marriage, that I'd been living half a life, and it wasn't fair to either of us. She listened without interrupting. When I finally stopped, silence filled the room like water. Then she spoke. I knew, she said quietly. What? Not about him specifically, but I knew something was wrong. I've known for years. Maybe always. You were never fully here. Even on our wedding day, there was this distance, like part of you was somewhere else. The words hit me harder than anger would have. Because she was right. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. She looked down at her hands. Because I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. Or that maybe you'd learn to love me the way I needed. I kept thinking if I was patient enough, good enough, if I made the house nice and took care of everything, you'd eventually see me. Really see me. Her voice cracked on the last words. It was the first time I'd heard her composure slip. Clara, I'm so sorry. She shook her head. Don't apologize. It makes it worse. She stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the garden she'd spent years cultivating. Her sanctuary. The place where she'd poured all the love and attention I'd never fully accepted. I gave you 17 years, she said. I gave you a son. I gave you a life. And the whole time, you were waiting to leave. That's not true. I wasn't waiting. I was trying. I really was trying. She turned to face me. Trying to what? To be someone you're not? To force yourself to love me? I didn't answer, because anything I said would sound like an excuse. What about Ethan? She asked. Have you thought about him at all? Of course I have. He's all I think about. Then how can you do this? How can you blow up his entire world because you're having some kind of crisis? This isn't a crisis. This is me finally being honest. Honest, she repeated. The words sounded bitter in her mouth. You've been lying to me for 17 years, and now you want credit for being honest. I deserve that. Deserved worse. She crossed her arms, wrapped herself up like she was trying to hold the pieces together. Does he know? Ethan? Not yet. You need to tell him. I will. When? I don't know. Soon. She laughed. Sharp and humorless. Soon. Everything's always soon with you. Soon you'll be more present. Soon you'll open up. Soon you'll actually be part of this family. The accusation stung because it was true. I'd been a ghost in my own house for years. Present but absent. There but not really. I need you to leave, she said. What? Tonight. I need you to leave tonight. I can't look at you right now. I can't be in this house with you pretending everything's normal while I process this. Clara, please, she said. Her voice broke. Just go. I wanted to argue. To say we should talk more, work through this, figure out next steps together. But I could see in her face that she was barely holding on. That if I stayed, she'd shatter. And I'd done enough damage. I'll go pack some things, I said. She nodded, turned back to the window. I went upstairs, grabbed a bag from the closet, started throwing clothes into it without really looking. Toiletries from the bathroom, my laptop, a few books, the practical debris of leaving a life. I paused at Ethan's door. It was closed, light visible underneath. I could hear music playing softly. I wanted to knock, to go in and explain before Clara told him. But it was past midnight, and I didn't have the right words yet. Didn't know how to tell my son that his father had been living a lie. I left him sleeping. Downstairs, Clara was still by the window. She didn't turn when I came down with my bag. I'll find a place, I said. We can talk about logistics. About Ethan. About everything. She nodded. I'm sorry, I said again. I know that doesn't change anything. But I am. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were red but dry. Save it for Ethan. He's the one who deserves the apology. Then she walked past me and went upstairs. I heard the bedroom door close. Lock. I stood alone in the living room of the house I'd lived in for 15 years. The house where I'd raised my son. where I'd built a life that looked right from the outside but felt hollow from within. I left my key on the kitchen counter. Then I walked out the front door and closed it quietly behind me. My car was in the driveway. I sat in it for a long time, staring at the dark windows of my house. My former house. I didn't know where to go, what to do next. The future I'd been moving toward for 2 decades had just collapsed, and I was standing in the rubble with no map. I pulled out my phone, found Elias's number, stared at it. Then I drove to a hotel near the highway, checked in, rode the elevator to a room that looked like every other hotel room I'd ever stayed in. Sterile, impersonal, temporary. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. My phone buzzed. A text from Clara. Tell Ethan yourself. Tomorrow. Don't make me do it. I wrote back. I will. I promise. Another buzz. This one from Elias. Just wanted to say goodnight. Hope you're okay. I stared at his message. At the kindness in it. The care. This man who had waited decades for me. Who had listened to me fall apart. Who had kissed me like I was worth holding on to. I typed back. I told her. I'm at a hotel. The response came quickly. Do you want me to come over? No. I need to sit with this. But thank you. Okay. I'm here if you need me. I set the phone down. Lay back on the bed. Stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow I would have to face Ethan. Would have to look my son in the eye and tell him that everything he thought he knew about his father was wrong. That the life we'd built together was built on omission and compromise and a version of me that had never really existed. The thought made me nauseous. But beneath the fear and guilt and grief, there was something else. Something small and fragile, but undeniably real. Relief. I had finally stopped running. Had finally spoken the truth aloud. The cost was devastating. The wreckage was everywhere. But for the first time in decades, I wasn't hiding. I closed my eyes. And in the darkness of that anonymous hotel room, I let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The loss. The shame. The fear. And underneath it all, the terrifying, impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, I could build something honest from the ruins. I met Ethan at a coffee shop near his school. Neutral ground. Somewhere he could leave if he needed to. He arrived 10 minutes late, earbuds in, backpack slung over one shoulder. When he saw me sitting at a corner table, his expression shifted, guarded, like he already knew this wasn't going to be good. He sat down across from me, pulled out his earbuds, waited. I'd rehearsed what to say, spent the entire sleepless night in that hotel room running through different versions. But sitting across from my son, seeing the wariness in his eyes, all the words disappeared. Your mom told you I left, I said. Yeah. I'm sorry. I should have told you myself. Before I went. He shrugged. Looked away. Whatever. It's not whatever, Ethan. You deserve better than that. He didn't respond. Just stared at the table between us. I need to explain, I said. Why I left. Why things have been the way they've been. He looked up then. His eyes were hard. Defensive. Do you have someone else? The directness caught me off guard. Yes. He nodded. Like he'd expected it. Mom thinks so too. It's not that simple. It seems pretty simple. I took a breath. The person I've been seeing. It's someone from college. Someone I knew before I met your mother. His name is Elias. I watched the information land. Saw him process it. The confusion. Then understanding. Then something that might have been hurt or anger or both. You're gay, he said. It wasn't a question. I don't know what I am. But yes, I think so. I've spent most of my life trying not to be. He was quiet for a long time. Then, does Mom know? She knows now. How long have you been lying to her? The question cut deep. 17 years. Since before we got married. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. So our whole family is what? A lie? No, not a lie. Just complicated. That's bullshit, he said. You lied to her. You lied to me. You built this whole life knowing it wasn't real. I didn't know what to say. Because he was right. I tried, I said quietly. I really did try to make it work. To be the person everyone needed me to be. But I couldn't. And staying would have been worse. For everyone. Worse for who? He asked. Because it seems pretty bad for me and Mom right now. I know. I know it does. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He shook his head. Looked away again. His jaw was tight. His hands were fists on the table. I don't expect you to understand, I said, or to forgive me, but I need you to know that none of this is your fault, and that I love you. That's never been a lie. He stood up abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. I can't do this right now. Ethan. He grabbed his backpack. I need to go. I watched him walk toward the door. Then he stopped, turned back. Are you going to see him? This Elias guy? I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe. Eventually. He nodded, his face unreadable. Just don't lie anymore. If you're going to do this, at least be honest about it. Then he left. I sat there alone at the table, staring at the coffee I hadn't touched, feeling the weight of what I'd just done settle over me. 3 weeks later, I found an apartment near the river. Small, 1 bedroom, windows that faced east so the morning light came in golden and clean. It was nothing like the house I'd left. No carefully arranged furniture. No family photos on the walls. Just space. Empty and quiet and mine. Clara and I spoke only through text. Logistics about Ethan. When I could see him. What needed to be handled with the house. She was cordial but distant. The wound still too fresh to navigate with anything resembling warmth. Ethan came to visit once. Stayed for an hour. Looked around the bare apartment with the same guarded expression he'd had at the coffee shop. We ordered pizza. Talked about school. Avoided everything that mattered. When he left, he said he'd come back. Maybe. We'd see. It wasn't much. But it was something. Elias visited too. Not immediately. He gave me space to settle, to grieve, to sit with what I'd lost. But eventually, on a Sunday afternoon, he knocked on my door with coffee and pastries from the bakery near his place. We sat by the window, talked, laughed a little, let the silence sit comfortably between words. How are you doing? He asked. I don't know, I said. Some days I think I made the right choice. Other days I feel like I destroyed everything. He nodded. That's probably normal, is it? I think so. You didn't just leave a marriage. You left a whole version of yourself. That's not something you get over quickly. I looked at him, at the patience in his eyes, the steadiness. No, I thought. It's not. He didn't stay long that first visit. Didn't push for more than I could give. Just sat with me in that quiet space and let me know I wasn't alone. But he came back, and then again, and slowly, carefully, we began building something that felt real. One evening, months later, I found myself standing in my small apartment with a wooden box in my hands. Inside was my wedding ring. I'd carried it with me when I left, not sure what to do with it. It felt wrong to wear it, wrong to throw it away. I closed the box gently, set it on a shelf. Not hidden, but not prominent either. Just there, a reminder of what I'd been, what I tried to be. Then I walked to the window where Elias sat reading, his legs tucked under him, a cup of tea steaming on the side table. I stood there for a moment, watching him. The way the evening light caught his profile. The way he looked so naturally at home in my space. In my life. He looked up, smiled. You okay? I nodded, sat down beside him. I missed you, I said softly. So only he could hear it. He set his book aside, reached for my hand. This time, I heard you. We sat there together as the light faded. No grand declarations. No promises about forever. Just 2 people who'd found their way back to each other after decades of distance and silence. It wasn't certainty. It wasn't easy. But it was honest. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.